James Rucker. He's an activist, organizer, co-founder of Color of Change, and he's with Citizen Engagement Lab as well. And James is just a phenomenal activist. He's one of the guys that took on Glenn Beck. I say one of the guys, but really the primary guy. And that's why Glenn Beck's about to go bankrupt. Anyway, but that's a different topic. Today, we're going to talk about Hillary Clinton because she is doing fantastic among African American voters. The Clintons have a great reputation among African Americans overall in the country. And James wrote a piece online that suggests that perhaps it's not as well earned as people think it is. So, James, welcome to the Young Turks. And then tell me, why don't you think the Hillary Clinton has earned that positive reputation among African Americans?
Yeah, sure. Well, first, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. I think, the legacy of the Clintons is misunderstood. And that includes not only, of course, Bill, but more importantly, Hillary Clinton. Bill, of course, kind of was deemed the first black president after playing the saxophone on the Arsenio Hall show. And I think part of the appeal of both Hillary and Bill is this idea that they understand us, or they're willing to kind of engage and speak to Black America, being situated, having an office in Harlem, and basically knowing how to walk a certain walk and talk a certain talk. But when it comes to both policies that Hillary Clinton has supported, vociferously supported, as well as looking at the ways in which she behaved and what she and her campaign did in 2008, tell, I think, a very different story. And I'm all for voters. There are many factors we need to consider when we support a candidate. But I actually think for Black America, for progressive voters who care about racial progress, some of the things that Hillary Clinton has done, and there's a pattern to it, I think they're offensive, reprehensible, they're problematic, and they just need to be examined. There needs to be a real dialogue. Hillary Clinton should not get a pass from Black America because we have this idea that on some level we can relate to her more, which I think is also perhaps not the case. But I think there hasn't been a rigorous dialogue and discussion around her record. I think actually her reaction to Ashley Williams last week actually speaks volumes. Killer Mike, who's associated with the campaign, I saw a clip of him speaking, and he talks about, in contrast, actually Bernie Sanders with Hillary Clinton in terms of how they deal with pushback, how they deal with people trying to hold them accountable. She essentially, in a very kind of dismissive way, just pushes Ashley to the side. And if you actually care about the issues that are affecting Black America, if you claim to support and agree with the idea that Black Lives Matter, that's not how you treat someone who's been basically silenced, or people who's been silenced repeatedly, to silence her yet again. So to me, it's a matter of bringing this stuff to light and having a healthy discussion before we just pass our votes on to Hillary Clinton.
Right. So Killer Mike's helping the Bernie Sanders campaign, and that's what he was juxtaposing how Bernie and Hillary handled this. So let's get into the details here of Hillary Clinton's record, because you use a couple adjectives there, ranging from problematic to reprehensible. Well, that's a broad range.
Sure.
So first, let's get into a relationship with Barack Obama, and right now, Obama seems to be supporting her, at least implicitly. Obviously, picked her to be Secretary of State. They seem to have a very warm and cordial relationship, but it wasn't always so. And people forget what happened during the 2008 campaign. And honestly, I covered it. I covered every nook and cranny of it, every detail of it, and I had forgotten a lot of what had happened until I read your piece, and I said, "Oh my God, that's right, I forgot." And so, tell us some of the things that she had done while running against Obama that might be a cause for concern.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, of course, what was happening at the time is you had the right wing, kind of Republicans talking about Obama as this other, right? Not American, born in another country. He's not Christian. He's, this kind of Muslim plant, let's say. And that was the atmosphere. What's interesting, and most folks don't know, and it's hard to connect the dots, some of that stuff actually originated from the Clinton campaign. There's this image that was floated around with Obama in a turban, and that was allegedly, and it took a while for the Clinton campaign to kind of in a soft way claim they didn't have anything to do with it, but they had surrogates out there basically saying, "What's wrong? This is his native clothing," let's say, stuff that even John McCain, when at one of his rallies at a town hall, there was a woman who said he's an Arab and he's a Muslim and so on. And McCain said, look, first of all, that's not true. I know the man, and what we disagree on is policy. If you look at the way Hillary Clinton on 60 Minutes, when asked, do you believe Obama is a Christian? Her answer is basically, well, I trust him. I believe him. I take him at his word. And then when given a moment to really clarify, wait, but do you believe, he's a Muslim? And she says, well, not as far as I know, right? So there's that kind of soft thing. But if you look at written materials from Mark Penn, part of the campaign plan was to actually kind of paint Obama as un-American, as not one of us. She appealed to white voters, talking about some people, and these are white voters in kind of red territory, more kind of, let's say, not as race-friendly territory. And she said, some people call you swing voters. I call you Americans, right? She talks about white, hardworking Americans, essentially as the true Americans. And so this was a theme throughout the campaign. There was the hanging around Obama's neck of Jeremiah Wright, which many believe, and there's some evidence to suggest that whole frame came into play as a result of the campaign. But essentially scaring white America. Here's a black pastor who's not unlike most black pastors, who are fiery and speaking truth about the history of race in this country, and what politicians have done to black people over the years. Just speaking very frank about that. That gets spun into something to scare white America. Clinton plays right into that, supports that. Even if it didn't come from her, like I said, it looks like it came from the can. But lifting that up and using that. And the irony is that just a few weeks ago in Harlem, Hillary Clinton, surrounded by a lot of very powerful black folks, basically goes in on Republicans, saying the idea that they're going to hold up a Supreme Court justice nominee from Obama, that this is racially tinged in its coded language. Well, this is exactly what she did in 2008. And not only is there kind of a pattern if you examine it, you can look at actually emails from Mark Penn. You can see that this was a part of the strategy. And I remember, just like you, I was in the trenches at the time, working, running Color of Change. And it was very clear what was happening. I think it's important for black Americans and white progressives to actually look at what happened and have Hillary, if nothing else, be accountable to that. She can speak to that. She can say, this is what we did in the campaign context. I'm sorry, I screwed up. But don't act like Republicans do this kind of thing and you don't, when the record is very clearly suggesting otherwise.
Yeah, and we're not the only ones saying this. Back during the campaign, as you point out, media figures had quotes talking about her talking about hardworking Americans being white Americans. They were very clear on that. And then Bill Clinton, in a speech in West Virginia, talking about how we're going to represent people like you, largely referring to a white audience. And again, it's not just us, the media at the time, saying that is very clear, coded language, saying, hey, we're going to stand up for white folks. And that's pretty tough stuff, right? And then the one I didn't know is the one you've now mentioned twice, the Mark Penn email. I didn't have it back then. It's from March of 2007. This was Hillary Clinton's chief strategist. And I just want the audience to get a sense of what their internal planning was. Because here's the email itself, right? He says, referring to Obama, his roots to basic American values and culture are at best limited. I cannot imagine America electing a president during a time of war who is not at his center fundamentally American in his thinking and in his values. Again, remember, this is not a Republican memo. This is Hillary Clinton's chief strategist when running against Barack Obama. Let me finish now. He says, every speech should contain the line, you were born in the middle of America, to the middle class in the middle of the last century. Let's explicitly own American in our programs, the speeches and the values. He doesn't.
Yes.
Now, all right, I guess if you're going to be enormously generous to Mark Penn, Hillary Clinton, the people who ran the strategy, you would say it's because his father is from Kenya and hence we're going to paint him as the other. If you were less than generous, would you think that this had something to do with race?
Right. No, I think it absolutely has everything to do with race, right? It's when you talk about white, hardworking Americans as the true Americans, that's about as specific, to race as you can get. And when you're willing to exploit the understandable fear of America dealing with folks who, for a variety of reasons, or let's say out to get us. You're trying to paint someone who is clearly American. This is a country of immigrants. So if you're going to look at someone who has Kenyan ancestry, he's a mixed race person, and you're going to use that, if your value system allows you to use that against him in order to build and maintain power, that says something, right? That's a problem. And that's what I think, when you look at what we need in terms of leadership, we need folks, in my opinion, right, who aren't going to go to that kind of low. Because if you, on the one hand, believe, yes, this country has a troubled history and we're trying to fix it, how can you be fixing it when you're actually a part of maintaining the same problem, right? It's just a place that you shouldn't go during a campaign period. I think it has everything to do with race, but really I think it has to do with what, as a politician, you're willing to do in order to ascend in terms of power. And to me, if you look at in the present tense, I think I think is a great example is Clinton supporter Rahm Emanuel. Several months back, she's with Black Lives Matter activists, talking about how what they're saying is right, is on point, and how she goes on and says Black Lives Matter. We need to keep saying it. People need to believe it. And then when actually Black Lives Matter activists and others are saying, wait a minute, this is in the context of Laquan McDonald, who was killed by Chicago police. It was covered up by Rahm Emanuel's administration. He has, his hands aren't clean at all. And when Black Americans and others are saying, okay, we need to hold him accountable, he needs to be out of office as a result, she uses her power to say, actually, I support Rahm Emanuel. I believe he will do the right thing for Chicago. So it's saying one thing on the other. The rhetoric is good, and then doing things in another opportunity, basically validating someone who's actually a problem in terms of the movement for Black lives. So it's not just history; it's actually present day.
So James, that really goes to the heart of the Hillary Clinton issue, whether it's on race or anything else, which is anything authentic about this? And if it's not, then how can we trust that she's going to do anything she says, whether it's for African American community or for any community, right? So it's interesting you mentioned Laquan McDonald, because I noted that during her South Carolina victory speech, she mentioned all these people who had been killed, African Americans who had been killed in different states, and she mentioned their moms. And I said on the air while we were doing live coverage of it, well, that was a powerful moment. But I noticed that Laquan McDonald was missing. And I thought, why? That's a very, very prominent case. And then I read your piece, and I was like, oh, of course, because she's supporting Rahm Emanuel. And he covered up Laquan McDonald's, honestly, murder for over a year. His office knew about it, and then they didn't let the public know about it. They didn't take any action on it for his political gain. She supports him anyway. She conveniently leaves that out. It's not like she doesn't know she's leaving that out. And then one of our viewers pointed out after our coverage, that every person she talked about that was killed is in an upcoming primary state. It is so deeply political. So this is a relatively minor point, but it connects to this issue we're talking about of saying one thing out front and doing something else behind the scenes. I want to go back to Reverend Wright for that reason, because she says, he wouldn't have been my pastor. She goes along with the criticism of Reverend Wright during 2008. But you point out, again, two things I did not know. One is that it turns out the Clintons had also had Reverend Wright over, but she left that part of the equation out. And more importantly, that her campaign might have had something to do with Reverend Wright then coming back onto the scene during that election season when it looked like that controversy had died down.
Right.
Dive into that for me, because I think it goes to show what's actually happening behind the scenes and what their real intentions are.
Yeah, absolutely. So, going back to that situation, Obama gave this speech about race, the history of race in this country, and, what America needs to be in the road to get there. A beautiful speech. And that, many of us believed kind of put the Jeremiah Wright issue behind him. Clinton leaned in after that, still saying, he would not be my pastor. And then after you thought the whole thing was over, here he is. Here's Jeremiah Wright at the National Press Club. And that's when he really kind of hangs himself, and by extension creates another problem for Obama. And what is not widely known is that actually a Clinton big surrogate supporter is the one who actually booked him, basically put it together for him to appear at the National Press Club, giving him a stage to create yet another peg that damages Obama, and that's not known. And this speaks to, like you said, the political machinery that's in play. And I understand, successful politicians have a variety of tactics that there's strategy that is deployed and surrogates are deployed in interesting ways to make things happen. But there need to be boundaries, right? And when you're exploiting, like I said, you're taking this black pastor who happened to be, I believe, Oprah's pastor. And, one of the things about that church is you have folks who are, folks in the streets, and you have folks who are like the Obamas and Oprah who are at this church. This is a minister who's talking truth in a lot of ways. And, if you look at, and I know we'll get back to what you said, but if you look at the sermon, that was the problem, right? He said, "God damn America." But if you look at what preceded 6 minutes before that, he goes through all the ways in which America is not living up to America's promise. And would God be looking down and saying, "God bless America"? And that's the context. He says, "God damn America." So you've got this, shortened soundbite that's used to bang up Obama, and then strategically used again by a Clinton operative to bang on him again. And that, it's divisive. It's scaring white Americans. It's actually setting the stage for Republicans to go deep. One of the problems here is, once she loses and once Obama becomes president, she's basically validated all of this horrible stuff coming from the right? She's made it very hard for the first, black president to engage on any issues that seem like they may be about race. You already have white voters who are worried, when he gets in office, is he going to be favoring black Americans? Well, he becomes more hemmed in, more limited in his ability to do work on, say, criminal justice reform or police accountability, because you've got a Democrat, you've got a leading Democratic figure who's basically, with the Republicans in effect, make it very difficult for racial progress to be achieved. So it's really, like I said, I understand politicians doing what politicians have to do, but there have to be lines. At least that's my opinion.
Yeah, and you mentioned it hems him in when he is president, and it validates the Republican framing. But you skipped over an important part, the general election. Because Hillary Clinton is now saying, "Hey, Bernie Sanders shouldn't run against me, shouldn't say bad things against me, because it's going to hurt me in the general election," or her supporters are saying that, which is, well, kind of presumptuous, as she was in 2008.
Right.
But she was willing to go to at the bottom of the deck, as Johnny Cochran, used to say. In hurting Barack Obama and his general election chances, and doing it, when talking about racial issues, right, and validating right-wing framing. So she did that back in 2008. I'm not sure she stands has a leg to stand on in this case. Okay, now let's move on to policy for a quick second here.
Sure.
And I don't know how quickly we can do it, but we got to talk about mass incarceration. Michelle Alexander has really brought this to the forefront, and she's talked about, hey, wait a minute. When the Clintons were in charge, when they were talking about policy, everybody brags about, they brought down unemployment. And again, a lot of it I knew. One part of it I didn't know. She makes an interesting case about how black unemployment went down, but partly because so many black men had been incarcerated in that time, and people who are in jail don't count towards the employment figures.
Right.
I was like, wow, that's stunning. I didn't know that. But then others, James, will say, no, incarceration was already going up. The Clintons didn't have much to do with it, and Hillary Clinton was the first lady, and it's not fair to pin it on her. What's your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So one is, I think what is fair, and it's important to recognize, is that the Clintons weren't operating in a vacuum. There was already a context of increased incarceration, the decimation of black communities, that was in play. But what's important, I think, is two things. One is the Clintons, and let's all speak for this, Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton. But the Clintons, as has happened repeatedly over time, to appeal to a certain constituency, black people become a football. They become something to play with, right? So they rode this wave, let's say, of demonizing of black people, of incarcerating black people, and while the policy was happening under Bill's watch, what you have, and this is what I think is important about the super predator moment, all right? What you have is Hillary Clinton not standing back and watching this unfold. She's actually leaning in and supporting these policies. She's becoming a spokesperson for these policies, right? So she owns them as well. And again, she could say, when Black Lives Matter activists engaged her, many months ago, she could have said, you know what? I was wrong. And here's how I was wrong. We learned things, but that's not her position. Just like with Ashley Williams, in a very kind of dismissive, condescending tone, she is not interested in being held accountable. She's not interested in actually owning her own words and actions. And whether it's the behavior during the 2008 campaign, or the things she said about super predators, or the support of criminal justice reform, the crime bill rather. These are real problems, and I think most black voters and most progressive voters don't realize that. It's not just Bill Clinton, and it's not just the stage that had already been created. They leaned into this, and Hillary Clinton leaned into this in order to gain and maintain power.
So, James, I know this is a somewhat unanswerable question, but I'm interested in your opinion in this case. We've been talking about facts. Now I want to switch to opinion for a second, because as you see that almost haunting video of her back in the 1990s talking about these young kids who are super predators, who have no conscience, no empathy, and you have to bring them to heel. God, that's such strong language.
Yeah.
You think that she's using that for political gain, and to be able to turn to the white voters and say, you see that? Don't worry. Like, we're on your side, and we're going to get these guys under control, etc. But that she doesn't really mean it. She's just using that for political gain, which is loathsome in and of itself, and to further that framing and use those kind of words, etc. Or do you think she means it? And I don't know the answer to that question. Of course, it's her mind. It's unknowable in a sense, but I'm asking your opinion.
Yeah, well, I don't know. This is part of the difficulty with Hillary Clinton, is I don't know what is for kind of political effect, and what is sincere. And I'm not saying she's an insincere person. I'm just saying it's actually hard to know which. And I understand, people do things for different reasons. It, in some sense, almost doesn't matter, because the effect is so clear and so powerful. When you have someone in the position of Hillary Clinton making statements like that, people look. The studies are endless in terms of the fear of black men, right? The fear of young black men. I have an 8-year-old boy who is black, and he's already very tall. Most folks think, and there's research that shows this, that black boys are seen as 5 years older than they actually are. So my 8-year-old, to many, will look like a 13-year-old. When he's 13, he'll look 18. And people are scared of young black men. That kind of language coming from Hillary Clinton. It's one thing if you hear that from David Duke. Well, that's David Duke, right? It's one thing when you hear it from someone who's racist, or find another kinder term, let's say. But when you have the First Lady, when you have folks who are at the pinnacle of democratic politics strongly making those statements, the effect is devastating, right? It cements this idea that these are scary people. And, when you hear her talk, it seems like she's sincere. It seems like she's not, saying this because it's useful politically. But like you said, we don't know. What I would just say is that it almost doesn't matter, right? If she's willing to, and in some sense it's kind of worse, if you're willing to use that kind of language, which will have the kind of effect that we're talking about, and you do it for, the building or maintaining of power, or to speak to certain voters, to have them on your side, it's really deeply problematic and of concern.
Yeah, when you talk about your 8-year-old son, it personalizes it in a way that I think other people might have trouble relating to if they're not in your situation, right? So, their claim to super predators could have been about white kids or black kids. They were talking about criminal kids overall. But we know the history of that kind of language, and that's not what was intended. It was clear what they were going for. And if you've got an 8-year-old African-American son, and you had somebody who in the past has called, it's clearly intended that some African-American kids who are super predators. Yeah, it can't help but trouble, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's the video that I know you guys have in your possession now, but Ben Jealous, who was head of the NAACP, very eloquently kind of says, look, I don't recall, he was a young person around that time, as was I, And he says, I don't believe anyone thought of white kids as super predators, right? And he talks about how this made it hard for young black folks. It did then, and it does now. Absolutely. So that's part of it. It's this stuff is personal. And so to me, when you're willing to do that on the one hand, right, and then you lift up the mothers of these black kids who have been killed, and again, then you're not going to hold a ROM accountable. That's when it starts for me to get really painful, because there are actual families that have lost family members to the criminal justice system. They've lost family members, at the hands of police, or they live in fearing folks who are bad actors in their neighborhood, but actually fearing the police more. And when something does go down, a crime happens, let's say, they're not going to go to the police because the police are effectively a different kind of enemy. We need to be working to clean up that kind of situation, and a lot of what Clinton has done has actually fed it, right? And so again, having kids, having black boys, I got two of them. It makes this stuff very, very personal.
Yeah. To me, one of the things that gets under my skin, I know it's a little bit of a tangent here, but is the racial stereotyping, taking hardworking Mexican Americans and calling them lazy. Everything flips on its head, right? So in this case, all the deals that we did with Native Americans and reneged on, and then we call them Indian givers. Like, it goes on and on, right? So with African Americans, I know who the super predators were. The Klan. The Klan were super predators. They were literally super predators. Okay. Now, do you flip it and you put that on African American kids, and it's just sickening, right? Yeah. Now Hillary Clinton is not remotely responsible for all that and for all that history and etc. But at a bare minimum, it's not too much to ask for her to not use that kind of language.
Yeah. Not only is it not too much to ask, when you use that language and you're not cloaked in your KKK gear, right? It takes on a very different meaning, right? And I think that's, when white Americans see crazy, racist white people saying certain things, well, they can hold that in a certain way and say, I see where that's coming from. That's them. But when there are people like them, people who they respect, who are using the same language, painting the same kind of picture, I actually think it's more devastating. And again, when you're looking at, you've got Trump, you've got the right that's crazy, and very racist. And it's beautiful what you said in terms of like the ways in which, I don't even want to repeat some of the things that Trump has said, but then you want to criticize these folks for basically participating in the same kind of rhetoric, just at a higher level, that you've basically sanitized, right? That's where, to me, that's what makes it so problematic.
Okay, so finally, James, you say all this, you make great points, there's the facts that back it up, but yet a lot of African Americans in power, a lot of black politicians are clearly on Hillary Clinton's side. So how do you square that? I know Cornel West's theory, Brother West says, that they mistook the freedom train for the gravy train. Okay, but I don't know what your thoughts on that are. Because if you're an African American, you got to be thinking, okay, James says this, Cornel West and Ben Jealous say this, Michelle Alexander says this, Spike Lee says it. Yes, a lot of African Americans who deeply care, who are activists, say these facts. On the other hand, I've got all these guys who are so-called leaders who are telling us, no, Hillary Clinton's fantastic.
Yeah. No, and this is part of the sad reality of politics. Back when, just to be very clear, Color Change is run by Rashad Robinson. I'm on the board, but Color Change does what it does. When I was running Color Change, different era, I saw up close the way things work. And I'll tell you now, right? For me, right, I do, I'm on the board of different progressive organizations. I work with a lot of folks. I have friends that are in the Hillary camp and in the Bernie camp. And I've had to think about, okay, just like I had to think about then, okay, what are the costs for me saying certain things? And I'll tell you, to talk about Hillary in the ways that I'm talking, there's a cost to it. I want organizations that I'm a part of to be supported by donors. There are donors who do not like this. And what you've got a political machine that the Clintons have in place that can bring consequences to you. So if you look at, for instance, the Congressional Black Caucus, you've got a good set, you've got a breadth of members here, but you've got some very progressive members who have a very progressive agenda, who are right on point on race. And you'll see some of those folks they're standing back. They're not endorsing Clinton. They're not going to endorse Bernie. They're just going to kind of keep their powder dry, if you will, because should they, and there's very few, but should they come out and say support an opponent of the Clintons, they could be screwing themselves, right? At the same time, you have some, and I love, I think John Lewis is an important historical figure, but if you see what he said, the way he said it, I don't think John Lewis could in his heart actually believe what he said, right? And so then you have to ask yourself, why, right? You have a Jim Clyburn who had a very hard time with the way things played out in 2008 as we were approaching South Carolina. I mean, heated exchanges between he and Bill Clinton. He went on the record very upset about what was happening. And now he's supporting Clinton. Now, you got to wonder, so I think the costs of being on the wrong side of the Clintons is high, and the benefit of being on the right side is also very high. So, no mystery, right? I mean, black politicians are politicians. Black folks in D.C. are folks in D.C. who also are black. And so I think, what the Clinton campaign has done a wonderful job of is using the power of their machine to get the right people saying the right things at the right time. It's unfortunate because I believe that, when you see a figure like John Lewis, if you're an African American and his basically, civil rights credentials, when you see him lifting up Hillary Clinton, and also basically, painting her opponent negatively in ways that actually aren't true. But that's of course beside the point. When you see that, you think, oh, this must be a candidate for me, and that's again what I think is so hard because we have figures saying things and painting a certain picture when we have facts that paint a very different picture. And what's most accessible, John Lewis will be on TV. That story is covered very widely. The actual details of what Hillary Clinton has done, both in terms of policy support as well as the behavior of herself in the context of her campaign. That's way below the fold. That's if it's anywhere. So yeah, that's my take. Is that you've got politicians who have to be. They think about, what's my access going to be? What's my position going to be in 1, 2, 3 years? Especially if Hillary Clinton becomes president, right? People don't want to be on the wrong side of that.
Okay, James, you're necessitating another question because the audience at home doesn't know what it means, the cost of being against Hillary Clinton if she wins. When you talk about donors being similar, they don't know that system. So
yes.
Give us one more step in that direction so people have a better sense of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, let's say that similar when Obama became president, right? If you look at who gets positions in the White House, there are moments where you have folks who are in Congress running to get reelected. Does the president come and stump for you? Does he help you, or does she help you? Right? And similarly, right? You have folks who work in campaigns. And this is outside of Clinton, but I want to just paint the picture. When you have a sitting, let's say, Democratic member of Congress, right? Doing, let's say, bad things, and there's someone who challenges them in a primary, another Democrat. People who go and work for that challenger's campaign, oftentimes, and this is I've seen this happen, where if you go work for that challenger, I don't care what the issues are, if you're actually going to disrupt the trajectory of someone who's sitting in Congress, good luck trying to find work as a campaign person, next go round, right? The Democratic establishment will do that. Similarly, the Clintons, and these folks don't forget, right? They will let you know when it comes time to have access to the White House, when it comes time to actually having them validate what you're doing. And in the donor community, there are folks, for whom if you undermine a candidate of their choice, it's a problem for you as an organization. It's a calculation organizations have to make. I don't know if I'm painting the picture well enough. I don't feel like I quite am, but
And I think people get it. Look, the Clintons have accrued an enormous number of donors throughout their career. because of the system that we're under, they had to do that, right?
Yeah.
And I can't stand that system. But I understand what they did. But the access to those donors then creates power with so many other groups that those donors also give to, right?
Yes.
So
that's right.
If they're going to give to, and it doesn't have to be African American groups, it could be anybody, right?
Right.
And all those progressive groups, a lot of them are reliant on the same donors. And if the groups say, hey, maybe you shouldn't give to that progressive group in Washington, well, that is tremendous power.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that, when I was running Color Change many years ago, that was one of the things. There were moments when we challenged, for instance, very powerful black politicians, and I was told, look, you going into these waters, you disrupting the way things work, you basically going after. In this case, we had some issues with the Congressional Black Caucus. Just quick side point: the Congressional Black Caucus PAC endorsed Clinton. In this race, they also refused to endorse Donna Edwards, right? Who is a progressive hero, has been a champion for working people, for low-income black people. Just a brilliant member of Congress. She's running for Senate, and so there's a question about wait a minute, who's calling the shots here in the case of the Congressional Black Caucus PAC? It turns out there's some members of the CBC, and there's also a bunch of lobbyists. So, that starts making sense. But if you go after the CBC, right, you're disrupting the way DC power, the way black DC power works. And I was told, you do this, right, no black member of Congress, no black kind of DC insider will be seen with you. You're going to have problems with donors. You better watch it. And, it turns out I didn't listen to that because, for a variety of reasons, I started Color Change to challenge power, and I wasn't going to kind of in the final hour when we were actually about to get something done, back down out of fear that the money would come. I figured, look, we do good work, we hold the right people accountable, and we'll figure it out. But that's a tough equation, and a lot of folks are not in a position to play with their income in that way, but it felt necessary. But that's what people will hold over your head. And similarly, so with the Clintons, you're taking a very big risk by putting yourself on the other side.
James, that is super enlightening. Thank you for sharing that with the audience, because a lot of folks at home don't know how this game is played, and all we see is the theater. And
right.
Thank you for exposing us to what happens behind the theater. That's exactly what we try to do on the Young Turks.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
James Rucker, one of the top activists in the country. Thank you so much for joining us here.